We're diving into 6 terrifying, true Bigfoot and even a Dogman encounter that will absolutely keep you up at night. These aren't just stories, these are first-hand experiences for the people who lived through them. Everything from strange growls and baby cries in the night to a Bigfoot creature that tried to open up this gentleman's door while he was camping. We're going to get into all that. But before I do, I just want to say thanks for hanging out with me today. If you've got an experience or an encounter you would like to send me, you can send it to me by email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. But let's jump right into these stories.
3 friends and I, it was supposed to be 4 friends, went camping along a creek that we never went camping on before. It was between Westville and Watts, Oklahoma, on Highway 59, about, I'd say, a mile and a half north. We got settled in on the creek. The friend that was supposed to bring the majority of the food didn't show, but my friend and I caught a lot of fish and crawdads. So, we were doing good on the creek bottom. And we were having fun, talking, had a fire going. Nighttime set in. And it was one of the biggest full moons you'd ever see. It was huge. You could see everything almost as plain as day. Everything was just in a blue light. And one of my friends, Mike, looked into the hayfield that was on one side of the creek and saw 4 figures, and he pointed them out to us. So we all stepped out of the firelight and got into the dark and started looking, and we saw 4 of them. 2 of them, the 2 adults were walking about 15 foot apart from each other, and there were 2 little ones, different heights, walking in between them. And we were kind of bewildered because they looked really tall, and you could actually, with the moonlight, you could see their hair kind of blowing in the breeze. We knew they wasn't wearing clothes. We could see their hair kind of just like moving. And they just kept shuffling across the hayfield and went toward the creek, probably about 300-400 yards from us. And we went back to our fire immediately. I mean, we were all between like 15 and 17 years old, just in high school, junior high, friends that had grown up together. And we went back to our camp because we're backwoods types. We always have like tomahawks and knives and everything. So we grabbed our stuff and we just kind of kept close to the fire. Nothing really happened after that for about, I'd say, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And that's whenever it started to get a little scary. Rocks started flying into our camp. About, golf ball size, maybe a little bit bigger than that here and there. And then we heard the tree knocking, just that everyone talks about. And then we started hearing the howling. We got scared, but we were in the middle of the woods. I mean, there was basically those hay fields and on our side of the creek, and then it was 20-foot bluffs on the other side of the creek. And the trail that we walked in on was on those bluffs. It was a very narrow and winding trail. So we couldn't actually hike out in the middle of summer, just afraid of all of the snakes and everything and not being able to see. So we just built our fire higher and stayed close to it and stayed together. We kept hearing the howling, and at one point my friend Anthony said, "Look up." And we looked up on the bluffs about 15-20 foot above us. We saw a clear face looking down at us, and it's kind of comical. It kind of looked like Harry from Harry and the Hendersons, only not so nice and goofy. It looked kind of angry. And then further down the creek, we heard a loud roar, and we heard wood snapping like you would not believe. And the only thing that we could do, that we could think to do, was keep the fire going high and just stay together with any kind of weapon that we could make. We even made makeshift spears. I mean, we were kids. We had no idea what we were doing. That morning, I don't think we really slept. Curiosity got the best of us. We went out into the hayfield and we saw where they walked through, and it was a pretty big path. And then we walked down the creek where we heard the roar and the tree snap or the wood snapping, and we found a cedar tree, probably about a foot in circumference, uh, had been snapped completely in half, and you could see in the embankment the feet pushing into the red dirt, and that it had laid that tree over. We didn't feel anything before. I mean, the only thing that alerted us to it was Mike spotting them in the field. We didn't smell anything, but I got to say that the wind was blowing against us. Like, I think we were upwind. Like, the wind was blowing against our backs toward them. We did start to get a little bit of smell, almost skunky type smell, whenever we saw that one on the bluff, but it still was kind of faint.
Best way to start this out first is to say I never really believed that these things existed prior to this event. I was skeptical like anybody else. However, seeing is believing, and I definitely believe now today. This happened 45 years ago, a little over 45 years ago, 1975. Just went ahead and PCS down from Fort Benning, Georgia. I was in the military, and I PCSed to Fort Polk, Louisiana, from Fort Benning, Georgia. Was attached to the 1st 61st Infantry Battalion over there, and we were just getting it activated. My first experience in Louisiana, so getting used to all of it out here. One of my partners was from outside of Camden, Arkansas. And so one day he just said, "Hey, why don't you come up here for a weekend, stay with my family up in the farm?" We got a farm outside of Camden, about 10 miles out in the woods. And we were used to the woods. The military, we stay in the woods, especially for infantry. So we jumped on it, went over there, about a 4.5-hour drive from post to the farm. It's about a 250-acre farm, good sized little farm over there. He had a country family that was great. I'm talking about just wonderful. His granny cooked. I mean, she was amazing at cooking, and that hooked me right there. And if I'd been 30 some odd years older, I'd probably gone with her, but instead of his sister. But I met his sister. We became an item pretty quick. And that was it right there. And from that point, every weekend I was going up there and stay up there with him. Her daddy, Bobby, he was a great guy. And I'd go up there to help him work the cattle. I'd help him go up there and work, build fence, and whatever we had to do around the farm to help him, tend to the cattle, caught the hogs, everything. I love that kind of stuff. That deep out in the woods like it was great. And get away from post. Hey, let me tell you something. On weekends, you want away from post, because if you're still on post in the military, they need detail. Guess who they call? So I made sure I was out. Any case, so it was one particular Friday night. We had finished supper. We was hunkered down inside the den. It was an amazing supper. About 9:30 at night, we're watching TV. Me and her and her daddy, her mama, 2 brothers, and her granny was in the kitchen washing dishes. All of a sudden, she screams. Man, I'm talking about, they say that, you can hear everything you want through a mobile home walls. Well, through these old houses, man, you can hear the same. It's just like paper, So she screamed, we jumped and ran down the hallway. And of course, being a soldier, I was the first one there, and I went ahead and got in that kitchen, and I almost cut a flip over Granny. She's on the floor, and she's pointing at the kitchen window over the sink, saying, "I seen it again, I seen it again." And she was just hysterical. Well, naturally to me, in my military mind, I assumed she seen an intruder trying to break in the house. Evidently, her family knew what it was, but didn't let me on. And that's fine. Well, I mean, what their reasons, I understand. But I wish I would have had an idea what I was fixing to go after. Any case, so we ran out back. Her daddy said, "Let's arm up." Got some weapons off the racks in the hallway. We went out back. Her brothers went to the right. Me and her daddy went to the left. Of course, the girls stayed inside and tended to Granny. As we went, it was 9:30 at night, like I say, but it was a very bright moon. And you know how that moon gets when it's like daylight. You can see everything, almost like daylight. It's just, I mean, a little bit dimmer, but you know what I'm saying. We got out there. I remember seeing the cattle clear across the pasture. They were all hunkered up on the far end of the pasture. They were cutting up, so I knew that meant they was pretty much had some kind of a predator out there. It could have been a bobcat, could have been a coyote, who knows what. But what caught me off guard and got me to really thinking was I heard his 3 blue ticks he had for hunting dogs. They were under the house whining. And I'm talking about dogs that would chase anything, son. You know, if there's been an intruder, they've been cutting through them woods going ahead and making a racket. You could have heard them a mile away. They were under the house whining. These deer are trained to go ahead and run deer and everything. Now I got my military mind's going, what in the world are we after? Because if it's not an intruder, it's something big and bad. And I don't know what, I had no idea. So I said, Bobby, the dogs. He said, don't worry about that. Just keep close behind me. Well, okay, I'm picking up something was up. We're getting close to the corner post. We had just built a fence not too long before that was dividing fence. And it divided the pasture from a 50-acre swamp he had, and he didn't want the cattle going into there. So we built that fence. It was made of, I believe it was 4-foot cattle panel with a stretch of barbed wire over it, so about 5 foot high. As we got close to that corner post, I remember I was catching a stench, and it was a pretty rough one. I mean, it was like matted urine and something dead, as best I can describe it. It make you want to gag. We got close to that post, and that's when we jumped something up. Something in the thicket over there started going, turning and burning, son. And to me, it sounded like a 2,000-pound rhino because it was doing some damage in that thicket. I'm thinking, what in the world is that? And all of a sudden, this is the point when my whole world changed. Everything I was taught to believe existed in this world came to a sudden stop right then. This thing jumps the fence, and it lands down about 25 foot from us. This isn't 100 yards away. This isn't 150 foot away. This is about 25 foot. We counted the next morning. We did a recon. It landed right there in the pasture, flank of us now. We saw it side view. It stood up. It was flank of us. And it stood up, and this thing stood up, it seemed like forever. When it stood up on full length, it was about 8 foot tall. Every bit 8 foot tall, covered in long, stringy hair. It was dark hair. Can't tell you it was black or brown because, I can tell you it was dark. Flank of us, we could see its profile like a huge man's face. It didn't have a snout, so I knew it wasn't a bear. It had long arms. I remember the huge hands, and it was covered in hair. Like I said, very muscular, very, very powerful build. And then this all happened in a matter of seconds now. I'm just trying to give you the picture of what we're looking at. Then all of a sudden it just took off like a rocket. It never looked at us. It never tried to attack us or anything. It left. It ran. And it ran across the pasture, which gave me the inclination this thing's as scared of us as we're scared of it. Now, understand, I got a 12 gauge. Bobby had a 410 and a flashlight. If this thing attacked us, them 2 guns wouldn't have done nothing but got us killed. I promise you right now. But it ran from us. It ran across the pasture. And when I say ran, I'm talking about running like this, like a track star. Arm swing. It was straight up, running like a man. Didn't fall to all fours at any time that we saw. It stood up like a man and ran like a man. Now, this is what got me thinking, okay, this ain't no bear. I have seen bear before. I've seen grizzlies and I've seen black bears and such. When they stand up, and they can stand up straight like a man, and they can walk like a man, no question about it, but they cannot run like a man. All right, a bear has to fall to all fours. Its hips and leg structure won't allow it to run. Like a man, it has to go to all fours. This thing ran like a track star. Well, as it goes across the pasture, it went ahead and it crashed through the cattle gate. That might not sound like too much, but when you understand this cattle gate, we built out of 2x6s, oak 2x6s. And if you know anything about oak, it's a very hard and heavy wood. You're going to break that, you the man. I'm going to tell you that right now. It took a D9 dozer to go through that thing, and it shattered them 2x6s, shattered them, twisted up that barbed wire. Next morning, we went out and did a recon, but in any case, as it went through that, I don't know why, if it hollered because of the fact that got tore up by that barbed wire, or because it just let us know it didn't want us chasing it. I don't know. But it roared, and it roared a roar I ain't never heard in my life. Now, I live in the backwoods of Louisiana. I've lived out here now for dang near 40 years, out here in the backwoods of Louisiana. It is almost 6 miles out my back door to the next house through the woods. I hunt all these areas out here. And I'm I'm used to hearing critters. I'm used to hearing coyotes, bobcats, panthers, you name it, owls of all kinds. I mean, we're used to hearing that. I've never heard anything like it to date. Never heard anything like that in the woods. It sounded like a lion, how a lion would growl, like real bassy type of a growl, and like an elephant. Boy, if you don't talk about it, that's scaring you. What? So, I mean, that just made my hair and my neck stand up. And in any case, all this time, my mind's going in full gear, trying to figure out, what did I just see? What did I just look at? And I'm trying to rationalize. I'm a 19-year-old soldier, right? I'm 66 now, but I was a 19-year-old soldier. So as a youngster, I'm thinking, what? Anyway, Bobby was shook up, badly shook up. Boys come around the corner. His sons, my girlfriend's two brothers. They said, "Yeah, did you hear that? Did you hear that?" I said, "We've seen it." Well, they went ahead and they said, "Oh man, we got to calm down." We were just, I mean, I was like trembling. I was like, "What in the world is this, man?" We don't know. Well, that's when Bobby come clean a little bit. He said, I don't know what this is. How do I protect my family? I don't know what to do. It comes around here every once in a while, looking in the window at Granny. Now, it never tried to break in the house. It never tried to attack anybody. And the only damage ever done was that night when it went through the cattle gate. So he said, but we don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. When things calmed down a bit, went ahead and got his brother, about 6'4", tall, skinny fella, got him to stand under the kitchen window because the house is on pilings now, not too far from a river. So they had it up on pilings. And just for scale, had him go ahead and reach up as high as he could and go ahead and touch that kitchen window if he could. Now, 6'4", full arm swing, he's probably touching about 7 foot fingertip, I would think. And he can barely touch the bottom rim of that kitchen window, which told me, perspective, this thing had to have been 8 foot tall or taller to look in that window like it did. Well, at that point in time, hearts are still beating. We're trying, adrenaline's running still, but we calmed down some, went in the house, see about Granny. Got inside there, she had calmed down a lot. We got inside there, boy, I'm talking about, I'm just, talking about the coffee pot is ready and I'm working on it. Trust me, I'm working, and I started working on it then. I didn't stop till the next morning, and I kept on. I asked Granny, I said, "Granny, look," I said, we seen this thing. She goes, "You saw it?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, we saw it. It was close. We did not see its face real well. We saw a profile and it stood up because it was blank of us, but we did not see its face straight on. You saw it looking in the window." She goes, "Yes, I did, several times." And I said, "Okay. Would you mind telling me what you seen?" She goes, "Yes, it was like a huge man's face, rough skin, hair all around it, but not on the face, if that makes sense. Big red glowing eyes." And that was really a tripper for me, because red glowing eyes, that's, how do you explain that? That's a vampire, right? But I didn't doubt her. I did not doubt her. These are Pentecostal people here, and I was not about to doubt her. I mean, I know what I've seen, so I'm putting this together one piece at a time. Well, we sat up that night, and of course, I'm going to tell you right now, there was no one sleeping that night. We all sat up around the coffee pot and the table, just drinking coffee and talking about this thing, trying to calm down, trying to go ahead and rationalize what it is. No one can really go up and say, "No, this is back in 75. Understand, at that point in time, Bigfoot was a little bit, people were talking about it, because a few years prior to that, in 67, there was one seen up there in California, which was the popular thing, but no one really, made a comment about that. It was hush back then, taboo. So that was, we didn't even, we were just trying to figure out what this thing is. I asked Bobby, I said, Bobby, have you considered going ahead and contacting the forestry department, something like that, or, law enforcement? He said, no, oh, absolutely not. I don't want this getting out, because back then, they lived about 10 miles outside of Camden, and back then Camden was a small town back in 75. And their church and everything else, they did not want the word getting out. People would, to think they're crazy. And I can understand that. I can appreciate that. So back in that time and day, it wasn't like today where people were talking about this all the time. Now, all of a sudden, back then, it was taboo. So he said, please don't talk about this when you go back to the post. Don't talk about it. Please don't. I don't want the word getting out. I don't want us getting laughed at. I said, Bobby, don't worry about it. My mouth's sealed. And that was one of the reasons why I had my mouth shut for so many years. But anyway, the next morning, we decided to go ahead and pull recon and sun up. And went out there, and we went back to, the point of origin, back where this thing, we first jumped it up in the thicket, and where it jumped that fence. And the first thing we're going to look for is prints, of course, and hair in barbed wire. No hair in the barbed wire where it jumped the fence. We found the prints, though, of course, when it, hit the ground. That thing had to have been 700 or 800 pounds. Easy 700 or 800 pounds, as big as it was. Massive creature. When we followed the prints across the pasture going to the cattle gate. Now, we didn't have a ruler or anything else. So I used my own feet, and I went ahead and I put almost heel to toe, almost fit in one track. Now, that's a big critter right there, I promise you. And so I was like, what? I'm still in shock, As we went ahead and went on, followed the tracks, went to the cattle gate where it was shredded. I'm talking about shredded. Looked over to the side, went ahead and seen where the corner post was. When this thing crashed to the cattle gate, the raw power of this thing going through there jerked that corner post over. That's a telephone pole cut down, put about 6 foot in the ground. Okay, because your corner post, of course, is your stabilizer system for the fence. It pulled it over, didn't break it. It laid it down from that pressure, that thing, power going through there. And even went ahead and moved the squeeze chute. If you know what a squeeze chute is, where they put the cattle at when you go ahead and lock them in there to go ahead and get them branded or go ahead and cut their horns, whatever. It went ahead and pulled it, twisted it. That's a lot of power right there. Then we went on, of course, tracks went on and went through a big old, I mean, nothing but a sawtooth briar patch, huge. Them sawtooth briars like this. We call them in the military. We went into them all the time in the woods, on bivouac and such, and we call them wait a minute vines. Because when you go through them and they grab a hole, they say, wait a minute, and you ain't going nowhere. So, any case, we didn't pursue it past that. But he harped on me, please don't talk about this, and I didn't. I went back to post, just everything in my mind going, these things are real. Oh my God, these things are real. And it changed everything. And what it caused me to do was doubt everything we were taught in public school to believe. I'm just telling you, in the history books, it ain't there. Something's up. So it affected me a lot, and going ahead and I didn't ever talk about it to anybody. And for years and years and years and years and years, got married in 84 to my wife out here when I came out of the military in 81. Stayed here in Louisiana because I'm originally from Southern California. I stayed out here, love country life, love it in the woods. So we come out here, homesteaded out here in the woods outside of Maryville, which is a small town, about population about 500. Okay, on Texas border. Any case, I hunted out here all the time. Her uncle, his name was Lewis Gill, great guy. He was about 75 years old at the time. We were hunting buddies. One day I said, Uncle Lewis, we've hunted all around here several times, done well, but I like to hunt about 10 miles from here in Anacoca Swamp. He looked at me, he said, no. He said, the old man said, no. He locked up quick, and he said, no. He said, I'm not going out there, haven't been out there since the 50s, and I ain't going back. You want to go, you go right ahead. Well, I figured because he's 75 years old, terrain is pretty rough over there, a lot of hills and ditches and hollers. And he said, no, it ain't the terrain. He said, to be honest with you, I seen something out there back in the 50s, and I ain't going back. It scared me to death. Well, I got my curiosity up. Well, Josh, I was thinking, hey, man, I got to figure a way to bring this out without insulting him or, without pushing him away. So I said, Uncle Lewis, I said, you don't mind tell me, what did you see? He said, I ain't talked about it. I ain't told my brothers. I ain't told my niece, was my wife. He said, there's nothing, I'm crazy. I said, Uncle Lewis, if you'll tell me what you've seen, I'm going to tell you something. He said, all right. So he went ahead and he told me, he said, him and a trailer named Milton Hickenbottom, which is I knew him really well. He lived across the highway from us. I hunted with his sons. And Milton and Lewis about the same age. They grew up together out in these parts. And when back in the 50s, they was out there squirrel hunting. And they was sitting out there when it broke daylight. They noticed it was like a big tree out in a white sandbar across the creek. They thought it was a tree. It didn't move. And all of a sudden, this, when the daybreak broke, they seen this thing better, and it was not a tree. It was some kind of big old giant creature covered in long hair. And I mean, he said it didn't move. Then all of a sudden, it reared back, and it went out this roar. He said his hat almost come off his head. I mean, he went ahead. He said it turned around after it roared. It reached up and had to grab the limb coming off the bluff above it. And then it went ahead and turned around, stepped up on the bluff and took off. They waited a few minutes. He said, we wasn't going out there. We wasn't crazy. We waited for it to be gone. And they went out there and they seen the prints in the sand, white sandbar. And we're stepped up on the bluff about 5 foot in the air, 5 foot high. So it had to been pretty tall to do that. And then that limb, he said, coming off that bluff up there, that he grabbed was about 12 foot in the air, which meant that thing had to have been easy 10 foot tall. Easy 10 foot tall. So when he told me this story, he kind of spit back into himself, and he said, I'm crazy. You think I'm crazy, son? You don't want to hunt me no more? I understand. If you don't want to hang around me no more, you think I'm a crazy old man. I said, Uncle Lewis, listen to what I'm telling you, son. I promise you ain't crazy. And that's when I told him my encounter. I want to take the pressure off of him. And this was helping me. First time in how many years I'm going to talk about it. But I opened up and I told him my encounter. That old man almost broke down and cried. He said, I ain't crazy. I ain't the only one. I said, Uncle Lewis, you're not crazy. They're being seen everywhere. So, in any case, from that point on, it was just big relief to him. And I felt good because now all of a sudden I released mine and he released his. And now together we're kind of like, wow. Well, I told my wife, and I told my kids. And my kids were a little more accepting than my wife was. Women tend to sometimes be, I hope no one gets mad at me for saying this, but sometimes they be more closed-minded than a fella. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so, and I can't expect her to, I can't. She didn't see it. I mean, so seeing was believing for me. But my boys, they were real open-minded to it. And they really, started saying, hey, man, yeah, because they've seen UFOs before in the sky. They can't explain, so but in any case, me and my boys always had a close relationship, always. And matter of fact, my youngest son, he's a warden of the compound I retired from. And my older son, who just came out here, he plays in a band from Tennessee. So, man, they believe Pop, so 66 years old, and I ain't forgot a lick of it.
First thing I'm going to tell you about is, how I kind of got into my traipse down the Bigfoot pathway. And it actually involved an encounter. It just wasn't mine. My grandpa, probably when I was about 10 or 11 years old, he showed up at my house one evening after school, and he told me that, well, I seen a Bigfoot walk across the road. And he's like, if the school bus would have been just a little bit closer, it would have seen it too. And so I guess that was probably how I got started in it. My first encounter happened in the Ozark National Forest. I don't know if you've heard of Boxley, but it occurred about 12 miles from there on Cave Mountain. what happened was I was deer hunting in November of 2021, and there's this fire tower that I always hunt below. I've killed a lot of deer down there, and the weird thing about this one was my first encounter was these guys showed up. I guess they were hunters, and they were asking if I had seen their buddy. I guess he'd left camp that morning. And they hadn't seen him. I told them no, I hadn't seen him. They didn't ask me to help them look for him or anything like that. So anyway, so I'm walking down, and I don't think anything ever came of that because I never heard of any missing persons around there. And I was there the next day, and the game wardens would have been there if something would have actually happened. But anyway, I was walking down to my spot where I hunt, and I got almost down there, and I start hearing what sounded like, well, I guess what everybody would describe as a wood knock. And this kept going, and it probably went on for, I'd say, close to 10 to 15 minutes. It was just steady. And I actually, when I first heard it, I mean, I believed in Bigfoot for a long time, but when I first heard this, I'm not going to use the words I used, but because it's not very appropriate, but I'm like, no way. Because I mean, it was shocking to me because I've always thought about Bigfoot, but I never expected to have an encounter at all. So anyway, I yell, I yell out, and I'm asking, is anybody out there? Because these guys just asked me about their buddy, and if it's their buddy, maybe he's knocking to let people know where he's at. I never got a response, and it kept on for a little while. And so I don't know if it's pure stupidity or I wouldn't call it bravery, but when nothing answered me, I just went and sat down by the tree I always sit by, and I sat there and deer hunted. My next experience occurred over at our property near Vender, Arkansas. I don't know if you've heard of Mount Judy, Arkansas, but it's real close to there. This was in March or April of 2022. We were morel mushroom hunting. My wife, my little girl, and her parents were there. And we were, just hunting for mushrooms. Everybody does it during the springtime. Anyway, I heard what I could only describe as a baby crying in the woods. I know from, watching YouTube videos and all sorts of stuff that apparently that can be associated with Bigfoot encounters. And that's what I was telling my wife. I asked her if she heard it, and she heard it too. And I'm not saying that it was a Bigfoot, because there are other properties that surround our property there. It could have been somebody outside with a child. But I just found it odd that time because my wife and little girl were with me. That kind of made me feel like something might have been trying to get their attention. But it got my attention because I pay close attention when I'm in the woods anymore. I don't go into the woods without a firearm at all. And I had one that day. Fast forward to November of that year. I'm hunting at the same property. I'm sitting down in this little valley, and I'm just sitting there waiting for a deer to walk by. All of a sudden, I hear something growl. It wasn't real loud, but it sounded like it meant business. So I'm like, well, I'm moving. I'm going somewhere else. So I walk back around the property, and I walk to the completely opposite side of the property. And I start walking down in the woods there. And I hear the same thing. Something growls at me again. So I'm thinking, there's either two of something or something following me. So a little bit after I heard the second growl, something dropped out of a tree. It was probably a squirrel, but I can't confirm that. I've heard of them, spider crawling, but that kind of hit my nerves a little bit hearing the two growls. So I backed out of the woods with my 7 mag facing into the woods, and I decided I was going to leave then. I think I may have stayed there a little while longer in hunting, but I wasn't down in the woods as far as I was. I don't know if it was more than one or if it was just the same thing, but either way, getting followed or having two of them. After that, me and my buddy, we worked together. We worked on the same shift, and we started talking. And he got to saying that I needed to come out with him on Table Rock Lake because he'd had a few things happen. His name's Richard. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. So the first time we went out there, this is near the border of Arkansas, Missouri, and we were just trolling along, just half fishing. And I'm looking for Bigfoot, but I'm halfway fishing. I'm not a very good fisherman. He could tell you that. I'm no good at using the bait casters. I've got to use the one with the flippy thing. But anyway, we're just trolling along, and we ended up seeing some eye shine. And then a little while later, I see this thing behind a log, and it's just like a white circle. And me and him are both looking at it, and it just vanishes. It like I don't know what happened to it. It just wasn't there anymore. About 5 minutes or less later, after that, we hear a wood knock. I mean, and this is the crispest wood knock I've ever heard. It sounded like a Louisville slugger, you know, hitting another Louisville slugger. Basically, you get that real crisp. I've heard people say it could be them clicking their tongues, but this sounded like wood on wood to me. And just a little bit after that, my buddy could hear but Richard could hear something walking along the bank of the lake. We couldn't see it, but there was something there. We went back out in October, and we were trolling along back in this one cove, and he has running lights along the side of the boat, and I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, man, I think there's something over here. We shined the spotlight on it, and it was like this structure. It looked like the typical what you hear people describe, like a little teepee without the covering on it. It wasn't huge. It was just a bunch of little sticks, but it looked like a teepee without the covering. Uh, so there was like some rope intertwined in it, and there was some like bigger uh, blocks beside it, like bricks or something. I don't know why they were there. I talked to my buddy about that. He said we discussed it could be man-made, but the funny thing is Richard, he'd noticed in the back of this structure there was a stick perfectly balanced on another stick, and it was just sitting there. And there was also like an impression on the ground. I wouldn't say, and it almost looked like the shape of a foot, but it didn't really have the perfect definition. It just looked like something stepped down and left an impression on the ground. We got off the boat there and looked around. Couldn't see anything right around there, but there was a bunch of little clams there, like something had been eating clams and stuff, or whatever the little things in the shells are at the lakes. Something had been eaten there, quite a bit of it. So anyway, we're leaving that spot, leaving the structure area, and when I was shining the light over there, the spotlight just went dead out of the blue. So I thought that was weird. But as we were leaving, when we got to a different part of the lake, the spotlight started working again. So I've heard several stories of people having their electronics fail, if they're near a Bigfoot or something like that. Like I said, I don't claim any of it's Bigfoot, but kind of I feel like it may be. Now, March of 2024, we went back to Table Rock Lake. Uh, we could hear something walking on the bank, sounded like it was on 2 feet. And we caught quite a bit of eye shine as well that time. We caught some of it on IR. When we were leaving, we could hear some. They were on both sides of us. Richard, he made like a little whoop, and all of a sudden, off to the left of us, which was on the opposite side of where we were hearing most of the stuff, something bust the brush, and just you could hear it go up the hill. As close as we were to it, I should have been able to look over to my left, and I should have been able to see it go up the hill. I didn't see a thing. So anyway, we felt like they were kind of escorting us out of there at that time. In May of 2024, we went back there. We went back. We had trolled up next to a highline right away, and I was shining my spotlight up. Well, it's actually Richard's spotlight, but I was shining it up the right away, and it just died. About 5 minutes later, and this is what really sent the chills down my spine. We hear this whistle, and I don't even know how to describe it to you, Josh. It was so loud that no human being could have made this whistle. And it lasted for a few seconds, and as it went on, it changed octaves as it went up. So that sent chills down my spine. About 5 minutes later, after that, a pack of coyotes fired up right behind us, and they were loud. You couldn't see them though. I don't know where they were. You could turn around back where you were hearing it, and there was nothing there. I know people are going to call me crazy, but I honestly think whatever it was, when it whistled, it called the pack of coyotes close to us. I don't know if they were using it to hunt us or get closer to us or what. So we're trolling out. And the bad part about where we go back in these coves is there's a bunch of stumps and stuff. So if we want to get out of there in a hurry, there is no getting out of there in a hurry because we have to troll out. So if there is anything, if it wanted to jump in the water and to get the boat, well, it's going to get in the water to get the boat. So as we're trolling out, uh, we start hearing stuff on the right side of us. It sounded like it broke a tree over. You hear how you hear wood breaking, and just a little bit after that, we hear something really, really loud hit the water, and that's when I drew my pistol because it just scared me. I didn't have my hand on the trigger or anything when I drew it. I just drew it out of instinct. And he said that wasn't no fish that hit the water. He's fished for years, and that didn't sound like a fish. So we're assuming that was a rock that hit the water. It also crossed my mind that a Bigfoot could have jumped in the lake right behind us, and that made me even more scared. But come to June of 2024, we're back out there. The lake was really up, and there was a bunch of debris in the water, and we were trying to decide where we wanted to go, and so we decided to go to a cove that was closer than the one we normally go to. And as we're trolling back into this cove, my hands, it was like 60 something degrees that night, but my hands started getting really, really cold. And I can't explain that. It could have just been my hands getting cold, but they shouldn't have been getting cold. Anyway, we get back into this cove and we hear something start busting the brush. I mean, like loud. And I'm trying to get my light on, or Richard's light, trying to get that light on. He's like, "You need to get that dang light on." I'm like, I'm trying. When I finally get the light on, it's still making the noise. And I'm shining it where it should, we're hearing all this stuff come from, and still can't see nothing. As close as we were, I should have been able to look right out there and see something just sitting there shaking the trees and stuff. But there ain't nothing, there wasn't anything there. And so after that, I think I had to sit down. I don't know if it was an adrenaline dump or what, but as soon as I sat down, just maybe a minute or two later, I hear something walking up on the other side of the boat. Now Richard, he don't scare very easily, but this night he decided we needed to get out of there. So we troll back. We start trolling out of there, and we can hear something walking in the woods, following us out. But yeah, I don't understand why something's making so much noise and you can't see it. I mean, I know there's a lot of people speculate that maybe they have hair shafts that are clear and they absorb the light around them or absorb the area around them. So maybe that's what it was. But as many times as I've heard stuff, I should be able to see at least one thing. I mentioned D.A. Roberts earlier. Uh, he has a podcast called DAX Machina. He's an author, real good dude. Well, we all decided that we wanted to go into this abandoned campground on Table Rock. So several of us went, his co-host, some of his friends. I didn't get all their permissions to mention them by name, so I'm not going to do that. But we had to go in by boat. Technically, we weren't supposed to be in this area that we went into, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said, we had to go in by boat. DA, his son, and his co-host, they were the first boots on the ground. And they said no sooner had they got there, they started having activity. I came in a couple of boatloads behind them. Richard, it's his boat that we normally use. He was ferrying everybody from the boat ramp over to where we went. So we're walking along and we find this area. We call it a track trap. Basically just a dried up area of mud. We found what kind of looked like a Bigfoot track in that area. Now this campground, it's been closed down for like 40 years, and it looks like basically like a bomb went off. It's post-apocalyptic. There's like all the campgrounds are grown over. The concrete picnic tables were busted into pieces, and these weren't just no little concrete tables. They were about 8 inches thick. So DA's co-host and I, we're walking in the back of the pack. We don't have our headlamps on. We're talking, and he's looking I'm here, and he's over to this side, so he's looking this direction, and he catches something as we're walking. He was like, "Hold on just a minute, Wyatt." And so we shine our lights on it, and now this is going to sound crazy when I tell you, but there was part of a deer carcass, the front leg and part of the skin, sitting in this cedar tree, and it was just hanging there. It was fresh enough that part of the meat on the skin was still red, but underneath it you could see where the blood had dripped, and there was deer hair and stuff all over the ground. That's probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen in the woods. Not gonna lie. Besides the next thing, it's pretty weird too. I'm getting a little nervous, so when we see this, I text Richard. He's on the boat still. He's just fishing along the bank of this peninsula. It's called Combs Ferry. I text him. I'm like, "Don't go very far in that boat because there's something out here." So we walk a little further, and I can't remember which one of us found it, but we found this fish head. It's stuck in the crook of a little tree. It had been torn off and placed in this little tree. The only thing we could figure out was it was territorial markers, and something didn't want us in there. And that tree that the deer was found in, a lot of people, I'm sure, would speculate that it's a big cat that put it in there. But this tree wasn't very big. It really wasn't big enough for a big cat to get up there and do what had been done. Plus, it was like intricately draped over these two limbs in that tree. And then, of course, we found the fish head. So we felt like something was sending us a message that it didn't want us there. Anyway, DA, his son, and his co-host, they were the last ones to get extracted. They said when Richard finally got back to where they were at, they had backed down into the water, had their pistols drawn, because whatever was there, it had started moving in closer to them. Before we got to the boat ramp, though, Richard had said he was seeing eye shine up in the trees. And I guess when they were extracting, they were seeing eye shine, all sorts of eye shine in the trees. So there was more than one of whatever it was. It's a good thing we didn't leave just one person there because, and I hate to say it, I believe that they can get violent when they want to, and especially with all the stuff that we seen that night. If we'd have left just one person, we'd have probably heard gunfire from the boat ramp, and they wouldn't be there when we got back.
I really think that a lot of people go missing due to these creatures. I don't think everybody that's a missing 411 case, but I think a whole lot. And I want to get into all of that. And I know you got a lot more to talk about, but you know, with all that happening to you and these kind of experiences and a lot of strange stuff, man. How has that impacted you, man? How's that affected your life?
That's a good question, Josh. I wouldn't say I'm like completely scared to go in the woods, but I don't go in the woods without a firearm. And after every one of these encounters that I've had, uh, when I get home, you've probably heard of people saying that they've got home and something followed them home. Well, even when I'm out there, I'm praying don't let anything follow us home, keep all of our families safe, and all this kind of stuff. But when I get home, I don't go to bed. I won't go to bed before the sun comes up or is starting to come up because that's how scared I get.
Well, listen, I think there's something wrong with you if you don't get scared, knowing that these creatures are there and what they can do. And you're smart by doing that, man. Cause I personally know several people that, have went out and had these encounters and then gone home and these things follow them home. Like I know somebody, I talk to them all the time. I'm not going to say their name. They probably wouldn't care, but he's had these things show up where he lives and follow him home. And it is scary, and you need to really keep your head on the swivel. And, so I always say stay prayed up because it's so very important, to do that. And, talking about that kind of stuff, man, going back to the encounter when you basically, I guess I would call it, got paced out of there. When you heard that growl sound, you heard it, maybe there's two of them, but what did that sound like? Was it just like a deep guttural growl, or was it, could you kind of explain a little bit what that sounded like?
I'll do my best. It wasn't real loud, but whatever did it meant business. And I went back and I listened through some like cougar sounds and stuff, and I guess it could have been a cougar. I had heard stories after that had happened that there were people have seen big cats out there, but that's not their MO most of the time. They don't. That's not their prerogative is to follow humans all the time. So I don't think it was a big cat. It sounded like it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't real loud, but it didn't want me there. Apparently. So,
well, I personally think you're really fortunate to be here to share those kind of encounters, because these things are very territorial in my opinion. And I think that you're right. There's probably two of them there, and it could have been a squirrel that jumped out of the tree or whatever. But I think that these things have a tendency to pace people out. And if you see one or hear one, there's another one really close by. I think they kind of run in packs. And, for the audience watching tonight that don't know about Arkansas, it gets really thick. The brush gets thick, and sometimes it's hard to see. And, I think you're probably very fortunate to be here to share that. But man, did you smell anything during that encounter? Did you feel or sense anything?
I didn't smell anything. No. The only thing I felt was the need to get out of there. I didn't get no mind speak or anything like that. It just felt like something didn't want me there. So I decided after the second one, like I said, I didn't leave right away, I don't think, but I wasn't sitting down in the woods near as far either.
I think you're spot on, man. Whatever it was, it definitely wanted you out of there, and these things definitely do. That's kind of their MO, man. That's one of the things they do is you hear about them all the time, pacing people out. I've had several guests on the show where these things will, go against the brush line and they'll follow them out, or they'll basically scare you enough to where you leave. And the situation with the deer carcass and, hanging in the tree that way, that's really interesting to me. I had a guy come on the show, and he was from Texas and East Texas, I believe, and he had a bunch of property out there, and they've got a problem with wild pigs and boars and stuff. And he said that he found a skeleton hung up in the tree, and it sounds exactly like what you described with the deer, man. What do you think that was all about?
The only thing we can figure out was it was a territorial marker, and not too long after that, there was like I said, the fish head was in the tree too, and for something to leave you something that's dead, kind of sounds like it might be sending a message that you could be next if we wanted you to be. So, yeah, that, like I said, that's probably the creepiest thing I've ever seen in the woods.
Well, that's creepy enough, man. And it's creepy enough to keep you awake at night, because these things it's such a strange world, man. And I'll always walk away with way more questions than I have answers, when I talk to people that come on the show. And, I kind of have this theory that for whatever reason, when you get down south, they tend to be a little bit more aggressive than other places. And I joke because it's like, because of the humidity, it's so stinking hot, they're gripey. But, what's your opinion with that? Do you think they're more aggressive here than they are in other parts of the country?
And I would say you're right. I'd say the heat probably does affect that, because, if I was big and hairy, I'd be pretty mad that I was having to traipse around in all this humidity. They gotta get hot. I mean, unless their hair acts like like a husky's hair, and they have like a double coating or something that keeps them cool underneath there. That's what I would say.
I never thought about that before like that, and I guess that is possible, because it would make a lot of sense that maybe that kept them cool. But who knows with these things, man? It's such a strange world, and I always like to ask people, and it's just because I'm curious and I want to know what everybody thinks. But what do you think these things are, man?
That's a tough question, Josh, because the things I've seen them do, well, I guess I haven't seen them. I should have seen them. Uh, for to hear that much noise and not see anything, I think they're flesh and blood. But I mean, I also say that there could be something supernatural to them too, and they have. I've heard of them finding hair, and then had the clear hair shafts, and that very well could be what it does. They just absorb the light around them, or absorb the area, whatever the color they're in. So if they're in the dark of night and you shine a light on them, maybe they just absorb the light, and I'm just not able to see it. I think they're flesh and blood, but maybe with some supernatural aspects to them too.
That's a good answer. I tell you, I look at these things through biblical lens, and I'm always trying to try to understand more and more. And I really do think there's some kind of offspring of the Nephilim or something in that realm. And the true statement I can tell you is when they're flesh and blood, they're flesh and blood, and when they're not, they're not. There's so much that they do, and there's so much in the world with these things that just doesn't make sense. I had a friend of mine that I haven't been able to get him on the show, but he told me some stuff that happened to him when he was a kid. But basically, in Arkansas, I won't tell I won't say where, but he had an encounter that was really strange. He said that he saw this, heard this scream, just this guttural scream. They were out hunting. And he said that the next thing you know, the brush was moving and all the things, and this black figure stepped out like a black Bigfoot. It was a Bigfoot. He said the next thing you know, he said it cloaked like the predator, and it was just gone. He said it literally just cloaked and was gone, and it's things like that just keep me up at night. I'm like, man, what in the world? And it's one of the reasons I don't like to go off into the deep woods anymore, because you just don't know what these things. You don't know what they are or what they could do. But it's such a strange world. But if you had the chance to see one up close and personal, man, would you want to?
Depends on if I was within arm's reach. I'd say probably at least 100 yards. That'd be probably good for me. But I have a feeling that I've been closer to them. I've been close enough that they could probably just reach out and grab me before. I would love to see one. That's the ultimate goal, is to see one if you're researching, right? But I would kind of like to see it from a distance. Good enough, good enough, good enough where you can see all the details, but far enough away where you could possibly make an escape.
That's probably the best answer you could give, man. I'm telling you, you don't want to be much closer than that. And you're right. You probably have been right up next to these things and you just didn't know it. I think a lot of times people that go off into the woods and go hiking and stuff, they're really close to these creatures and they have no idea. So it kind of makes you think twice about going out there, especially unarmed. And you're smart by going out there armed and going in groups and with people like that, because you just never know, man. It's so strange. But I know that there's a lot that you've been through and you've talked about, but you mentioned to me off air a Dogman type encounter or something about Dogman. Was that something you're open to talking about?
Oh yeah, that was actually the next one I was going to talk about. It was actually right outside of Branson, is where that happened at. But can I mention one more thing about the Combs Ferry thing real quick?
Absolutely, man.
Well, see, me and Richard, we put the boat in at a different area than what all the other guys showed up at, and we'd all left, and we stayed on the lake for just a little bit. He fished a little bit, but when we got back to the boat ramp, we got off and got to looking around and seen what looked like a footprint. So we go over there. I asked Richard, what he thought. So I took a bunch of pictures and I've sent those to you too. But it looked like one of them looked really good. And there's a bunch of partials there too. But so I sent them to DA, and we've all discussed it, and we feel like that was actually a Bigfoot track. But getting onto the Dogman thing, it was like a month or like the next month, I think, after we went to Combs Ferry, maybe the month after that. But we went back out to our normal spot, and we're trolling around, and we start hearing owl calls. I didn't think they were actually owl calls. I know you've heard of Tim Coombo Baker, but I heard him mention that if the owl call doesn't have a trill on the end of it, then most likely it's not an owl call. We go back to the cove where we'd actually found the structure the year before, and we're trolling along there, get to shining the lights up in there, and there's like 4 or 5 sets of eye shine right here. And I mentioned Harley, his encounter where he seen the Dogman and he turned around and it was laying flat on the ground. It had bothered me for a while. I was like, why were these eye shines laying on the ground? But when I heard Harley's experience, I'm like, that could be it. They may have been laying flat close to the ground. Anyway, one set of eye shine wasn't laying close to the ground. It was taller, and it was up next to some trees and stuff. And Richard said it kept peeking back and forth behind this tree. I mean, we were probably at this. We probably had this experience probably for 10 minutes at least, maybe 15, where we kept seeing the eye shine. Anyway, when the light hit this thing the right way, I won't say it's a full-on sighting, but the silhouette the part of the silhouette I was able to see, I could tell it had a snout like a dog. And I looked in the eyes of this thing, and probably wasn't a good idea, but when I looked in the eyes of this thing, I told Richard that ain't no Bigfoot. Like I felt evil in those eyes, and I told DA that too. So yeah, I believe it could have been a Dogman. I'm not saying 100%, but whatever I looked in the eyes of was evil. I'll stand by that all day long. And it had a snout like a dog.
Well, it all started probably when I was about 10 or so, because Dad was always exploring new areas and checking out the woods and stuff like that, and this event, I believe it happened when I was about 12, maybe 13, maybe 14, I don't know, but we had found this bluff that we'd wanted to go to, and Dad wanted to go late because night fishing's always good, that's what you do out there, and we just kind of just set up camp, and Mom and my brother and sister were younger, so they were in the car sleeping with Mom, and there was like several tree knocks between, like when we got there, and then we started smelling weird like odor smells, and we noticed things like that, and then we even started noticing like our picnic basket had gone missing, and we were like, we had a blanket come up missing, and then we started seeing other things, and we noticed down below the bluff when we were pulling our jug lines up, because we were checking them, because that's what we were doing with jug fishing, if you ever done that. And there was like a shadow, and then we saw like these, I seen it as the moon come down, it was like a glimmer, and I seen the eyes standing there, it was a shadow, and that thing was just massive. I don't even know what it was, but there was this god-awful, howl, and it just through the whole area, and it was just like, and Dad grabbed us and threw us in the car, and I was in the back of the station wagon, and I seen that thing. It stood there, and it was as big as the trees, and just black red eyes, and just hairy, and I don't even know how to describe it. It was just like, still haunts to this day. You still kind of just like, sometimes you dream and you see that thing, But I don't know what it was, but I'm pretty for sure, like you say, Bigfoot, that's, you experience something like that.
That's a really scary encounter, Floyd. And in my opinion, you're very fortunate to be here to share that with our audience. Why don't you talk us through what happened next after that? After your dad put you guys in the car, what happened then? What did he do?
he just peeled out and got out of there. It was like there was like a rock driveway, so what was like a bluff, so you went down, and like I'd said earlier, he had been, their trees were actually parting and separate. You could see the forest and the pines just parting ways and knocking down, and you could see it whack, 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 and your heart's just like, 90 to nothing, and you're just like, you can't move. You're like a stone, and this thing's coming at you. And that's another thing when we were fishing. We had noticed like big rocks coming up and just boom, and we're like, where the heck did that big rock come from? And who would thought, this, it's just hair raising.
Wow, that's really scary. So when he was leaving there, you actually saw this thing chasing you. You could see the trees parting. Did you ever get a glimpse of it through the woods at all when he was taking off?
When we pulled out and when Dad peeled out and he was throwing gravel, that thing was standing there, and it was black. It was at least 10, 12 foot tall, and it was a muscular, ape-like creature that was just covered in, it looked like he was covered in moss and something. I don't know what it was, but he was really angry, and he was like a bull does, when he's standing his ground, he's telling you to go get, you know what I mean? And he means business, and you just.
Well, Floyd, I know that's not the very first time that you had an encounter with this creature. So why don't you take us back to that encounter at your grandma's house and kind of walk us through that encounter?
When I was probably 6 or 8, my grandma threw me in the closet and Rogers, and she had something outside scratching and pounding on the apartment. That's the first thing I remember, is waking up and seeing the eyes in the window and Grandma throwing a blanket on me and throwing me in the closet. And literally, it like the house was being knocked over, something was beating on the walls, it was scratching, it was roaring. I remember very vividly being scared and Grandma frantic and calling Dad and Mom, or Dad and my uncle to get them over there now, and they came with guns actually, and they said that there were scratches on the front door all the way at the top and all the way down, and that's a good 8 foot down. And then she'd said there's a footprint on each side of her 6 foot fence out there, which it was facing the garden, which it's still, like seeing the eyes and then seeing the footprint on one side and the footprint on the other, and something that big to just just step over, Wow,
it's massive, man. It makes you wonder if that was the same creature you saw with your dad out there where you guys were fishing. But with all that being said, and those kind of encounters, and we'll go back into that more in a minute, but how did that affect you as a child?
I didn't like going outside. It messed with me, I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to, because you definitely don't want to go near the woods,
Yeah, it'll definitely change you. And once you understand that these things are real and that they're out there, there's a lot of people I talk to that it kind of takes the enjoyment from the woods away from them, and that's sad because it's a good place to be. That's where I go to pray and all kinds of stuff. But when you said you saw the eyes in the windows at your grandma's house, were they basically the same as what you saw when you were fishing with your dad? And kind of describe those for us.
They're red, black, glowing coal, eyes, and it just, I guess like fire, you could say. Something you just won't, you just can't forget it. It just imprinting.
Well, it definitely changes you. It affects every aspect of your life, and it's one of these things that you got on these rabbit holes trying to figure out what this thing is. But did you ever go back to that location where you guys were fishing at?
We tried to find it, but we never. It's like it just disappeared. It was there one day, and everybody just laughed at us, and so we just kept it quiet, and just, and then the local said, well, you're an idiot, don't go in the woods anyways. We were told you better, and that's how it was,
That's unfortunate because I think there's a lot of people like you that have these stories and these things that happen that, we just can't explain, and then they just keep them to themselves. And, the whole reason for this platform was to give people a safe place to share their encounters, because I think there's a lot of things in God's universe we don't understand, and I don't know. I find that very interesting, and something like that really does affect your whole life because it changes your perspective. But Floyd, what do you think Bigfoot is, and why do you think it didn't harm you that night? Obviously, it wanted you out of there, but what are your thoughts on that?
For one, I think possibly, because I was a child, for one, and then for two, well, you hear Indian legends about the Bigfoot stealing children, I've researched and read several, encounters about that, but I don't. I kind of think they're kind of like protectors or guardians. You know what I mean? Like they guard like sacred grounds and stuff like that for Native American, burial grounds and such. I I think it's something to do with that. But it's good theory there.
Yeah, that's a good theory, and you brought up a lot of good points. And I know I talked to a lot of Native Americans, and their stories and stuff. They talk about these creatures, being cannibals and coming in and taking children, and it makes you wonder how long that creature was standing at your window looking at you, and then also how long it was watching you and your dad out there. And in my opinion, these things aren't good. I think they're evil. I think they're Nephilim. That's just me. That's what I think. But I really do think that you're very fortunate to be here to share that encounter, and I appreciate you coming forward and sharing that with my audience.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I got another question for you though, and I always am curious to hear people's opinions on this. But if you had the opportunity to see this creature again, would you want to?
Possibly, because it's interesting to find out, more about it and where they come from and where they go and like why you can't find any of their bodies anywhere. Do they have a special burial or do they live underground in cities or what do they do? Because that's another theory there. We live underground cities.
As a kid, I was growing up there in Mountain Home. I was probably like 12 or 13. I'm a kid. I always played in the woods. Like as young as I could be, I'd always run out in the woods. And so I had no real fear. It was always my playground. So anyway, we lived out in the country, a little bit out of town. Had a above the ground swimming pool. This would have been, it was like in the summer, of course, we're swimming, but, me and a buddy are swimming and I start getting the tinglies on my neck. Like I'm being watched. There's somebody watching me. So I'll start peering around. I look down at the back end of our property. It's probably about 80 to 100 yards. It kind of slopes down, but we had like everybody around there has a clear cut off your fence so trees, limbs don't break your fence. But right down that clear cut, there's a set of brush probably 6 to 7, maybe 8 feet tall. It's hard to say. So I peer down there and I see this white head and shoulders just staring over all that brush. And so I'm really getting the willies and I'm eyeballing it like hard. And I said, no, that's got eyeballs. That's got a face. That's something looking at me. So without taking my eyeballs off of it, I nudged my buddy. I'm like, hey, what do you see? And he stares down. He says, what is that? And so we're both staring hard. But as soon as we looked back at each other, looked back up it was gone. But it was a face, shoulders, and it had to be minimum 8 feet. Probably much bigger than that because the size of the brush back there. So that was like my first ever encounter, and I wasn't real sure at the time, but then it started sitting in like, I think that was Bigfoot. I'm not sure at the time. So a little later that season, better start thinking about it. Later that season as the fall came on, like I said, I played in the woods, so I climbed trees, and I like to climb way up, so the branches are bending under your weight. So I was sitting probably 50, 60 feet up in this oak tree, and I heard a scream come through the forest. I'm looking down into it. I could see everything moving. Didn't see anything, but I hear the scream coming up, basically where I saw the white one coming from that area. No scream. I've heard cougar. I've heard bobcat. No. This thing cut through me so hard that I got chills. I was scared. Dropped right out of the tree, ran in the house. Oh, Mom, there's something out there. Oh, no. You're hearing things. They're not paying attention. Years later, couldn't tell at the time. Now, when I hear the Sasquatch screams, that was it. It was a piercing yell, and it was like guttural to this, like a woman screaming for her life. So that was like my first experience at that age. In a similar fashion to the same place, I've had a lot of encounters in a lot of places around the country. So years later, I'm probably close to 20, late 20s, 30. Went back to visit my parents, and the property behind us was, when I was a kid, you could wander forever. Lakes, creeks, caves, just endless before you hit a neighborhood or another house. Go back that many years later, they're rebuilding. They're building. They've developed land. Everybody's sold out, cutting houses. So I just go back there to kind of kick around and see what's going on, where the property lines are going to be, and see this older guy coming down. He owns like a couple 300 acres behind us. And we got to talking, he's like, well, I'm selling my place. I was like, yeah, looks like everybody is. Just kind of walking around. I said, hey man, you ever seen and I didn't even get white out. I was about to say a white one. He said, a white one? Yeah. He says, yeah, it's been here as long as I have. Oh, interesting. So he didn't have a lot of stories. We didn't dive into it too much, but he knew about it. So time goes by, a Bigfoot research website, I'm not sure what it's called, they actually have a report of a white one within 5 miles of where I live by, other people. So here this thing's been verified over and over. That's as real as it gets to me. That's all I had at my house. Now I had a rock throwing experience. I floated the Buffalo River. It's right out of that area. Now I floated a lot. For like 10 years, I probably floated 30 weekends out of the year, like every weekend, all year long, winter, summer, everything. So it would have been, I'm saying, a late summer trip with another boat of friends. There's 2 boats, 4 people. We're down just below the Elephant Head Wilderness, for anybody that knows the river. It's closer to the White River than, closer to the end. Anyway, interestingly, there was a verified case there from someone else, but we're sitting there hanging out, camping on the bank, campfire rolling. I'm a quiet camper and I camp away from everything. I try to tuck in the bushes so I can watch the wildlife. You'd be amazed at what's out there. But my friends are right on the bank. Then I'm about 100, 200 feet away from them. Their stereo's blazing. Well, all of a sudden I'm hearing rocks at the river. And I'm like, well, what's hitting the river? The bluff's too far away. Nothing's falling. The rocks get closer, and I go over to my friends. I was like, hey, turn down that music for a minute. Y'all got to hear this. There's rocks hitting the river. They turn off the music, and nothing. Several minutes go by. Okay, so they turn it back up. I go back to my camp. Rocks hitting again, getting closer and bigger. Hey, y'all, listen to this. Once again, it stops with the music. So, the third time around, rocks are hitting the bank on my camp. Like between us. Closer to me, but between us. And there's nothing in the world that's going to throw a rock across 100 and something feet of that river big enough, that are going to make these impacts. So I go, once again, yeah, nothing. As soon as they turn the music off, everything stops. It's dead silent. So I just, whatever, went back to bed, but I didn't have a light strong enough to see. And my ears I'm pinned on it all night. So after they turn their music off, the fire dies out. This was what blew me away. I wished I had some way to see what was happening. Something came down there. And now, in my mind, it was 2 creatures separately, splashing, playing, and running around in the river in the middle of the night. This is, 1, 2 o'clock. Deer don't do that. Bear don't do that. There's nothing to fish there heavily where they're going to splash. What in the world? And so as I'm sitting there in my tent trying to analyze this, it sounded like my children playing at the beach, splashing and swimming and throwing water and just in circles and playing. I thought, man, I wish I could see what was going on, because there's no humans over there. There's no way.
The charge, man, I would love to hear that story if you got time, man. If you want to tell us about one of the bluff charges, I'd love to hear that. I'm sure our audience would too. So,
yeah, I got time for that one. That was a time of my life. As the dog goes off on cue.
Right.
So, I just come back from the Pacific Crest Trail. I hiked like about 1,800 miles on that. And then I hit terrain that I just wasn't enjoying. So I went back to Washington, and I love the Olympics. That's my favorite place to hike. Oh man, it's beautiful in there. No roads. That's the beautiful thing. After so many miles, it is primitive. So I did a coastal hike. So you start, and it's probably about a 40-something mile hike. Started down around, well, they call it Rialto Beach or Hole in the Wall, and went north up to Shy Beach. Anybody that's familiar with the Pacific Coast or look on a map, it's right there. So it's primitive. This is actual national park, the Olympic National Park. So probably I think it was the third day. Everything was great, just hiking, normal stuff. About the third day, I think, I came around this bend, and now when you're hiking the ocean, you're on the beach. So you're at the tide's discretion, whether you're going to make a point or get through the rocks or the bullwhip kelp or anything. So I come to this point with a blind beach, meaning the point is real sharp and I cannot see what's around it. So I'm just kind of guessing. Before I could make the break on that point, I get a whoop. And I'm like, dude, I know that's not a bird. And it was right on the bluff above. Like, could have been 30 feet away. And me being me, I sat right down and I stared at that bluff until I was looking for movement, everything, anything. And there was nothing, dead silent, and no return call at the point. Like, okay. So after a while, I picked up my gear and I made the blind point. As soon as I could see the beach in front of me, the center of that beach, whoop, oh, there's the return call. So now they're watching. So I went through that beach, no other real issues. Made it to the next little point. I went overland because the bull kelp was just so thick. Anybody walks on that, you're going to slip and bust it. It's just ridiculous. So I just grabbed a trail overland. Now, all overland trails, unless they're hiking trails, they're made by bear. Bear clawing up the hills. So you're stepping in the bear trap. So at all times, you're ready for bear. So I get up this section and I'm, waiting for the bear. It's a little dark. Anybody that's ever hiked up there, those forests are dark even during the day, like just dark. Canopies thick. And came up in that section and I got the willies. Just knew it. Something's here. Something's following me. And everything about me said, get out of this set of woods. It's not right now. So I dropped back down, hiked back out. Later that afternoon, now I'm assuming they must have been following. I don't know. We're probably on a 12-mile day. So toward the end of the day, tide came up. I can't make another blind turn. I can't make it because the tide's too deep. I would have been chest deep in the ocean, not going to do it. So me being me, I found a bear trail. And I'm hand over feet. I'm crawling up this thing, thick brush. Here comes the bear. I'm ready for it. I've had many bear encounters, face to face, moms, cubs, all the things. It's okay. I don't panic. It's just going to happen. So I get up in the brush and I'm pushing through now. In these forests, these have never been timbered or logged. They're primitive. So you've got deadfall on top of deadfall on deadfall. So at any point you could fall chest deep in a hole. It's just your best bet is to find one of these 100-foot trees and walk along it and find another one. When you're walking on these, they're scarred from bear track and other animals. So, okay, now I'm finally it's getting dark. I'm getting to where I can't really find my way out of here. I'm kind of lost. And I turn around and I see this, huge tree, huge. I'm like, that one's going to get me where I need to go. I start walking toward it and I noticed a dark, underneath it, like a burrow, like, a dark spot. So I know there's a hole there. Don't go in that hole. Got about 15 feet from that hole. This daggum Sasquatch, it wasn't real big, maybe 5 feet, barreled out at me at a speed that I knew immediately that's not a bear. It come flying. Now, my instinct when a bear or a cougar or something charges, I turn my weak side, feed him my arm, feed him my weak side, so I've got protection on the right. So that's what I did. Reduced eye contact, turned my body to it, and when I did that, it stopped. And I'm out of the corner of my eye. It stops 3 feet away, less. I could have touched it, and it leaned into me. And I'm like, okay. It leans forward and goes, just like that, right in my face, right here. and then backed away from me without turning around, went backwards about 35 feet, 40 feet. So fast, quiet, never, I mean, no snapping, no nothing. I just watched that, when it moved, I turned and watched it. Backed up and it just sat and stared at me. Okay, this is really unique. So I took my moment. Wasn't pressing it. Took my moment to sit there and kind of stare. Now it's dark in there, so I'm not getting really great look, but I can see what it is. I was like, okay, thanks for this moment. And I turned and walked the other way. I actually used the log I was heading to because it cleared out. Walked away, found a creek. Creeks go to town. I just jumped in the creek, buddy, because I'm surrounded. I'm thinking. Jumped in a creek, just barreled down this creek, it dumped me out on a beach. Well, I'm stuck here because at 2 points, I'm not leaving. So I set up my tent, once again, back up in the bush. And just as sun was setting, just dark enough, and I hear crunching bipedal, heavy, coming right down the creek I did, right behind me, coming straight toward me. So I was like, okay. I just sat up and I let out a cough. It stopped, dead stop. 30 seconds, turned around, same path, same hard bipedal steps. Okay, so simmer down, took a nap, slept for the night, get up in the morning, open my tent. There's footprints down the creek, across the beach, up toward my tent, and then they went and used the brush behind me, I guess, because I couldn't find them exiting. So yeah, somebody, and they weren't real big though, and I'm thinking it was that 5-footer because they were about my foot size. Some things probably that one of them came to check on me. So yeah, that was just a blast of a night. No fear though. At no point was it like no fear. When that thing came and it just made its noise and backed off, then I knew nobody's here to hurt me.
When I was I've always been interested in this, but when I was a junior in high school, I had seen the Legend of Boggy Creek, and I had a paper to do in school, and I had to find sources, but I also had to interview people for it. And I called and called and finally found the right Crabtree, and I interviewed Smokey Crabtree for this paper, and he invited me to come down to Fouke. And so on my that's my junior year, and during the spring break, I went down there to do a few days of Bigfoot investigations. I did, and so I met Smokey, and he took me around all these places, and he showed me where if I wanted to see one of these things, this would probably be a really good spot to camp. And so I set up my camp, and that night, noises in the swamp were almost deafening, but every noise was something that was going to come and eat me. Scared myself silly. I wound up abandoning my campsite and sleeping the rest of the night in the parking lot of the Monster Mart. And I was thinking, well, this going out in the woods and looking for this thing, maybe not for me. So I became an armchair squatcher, watched all the movies, read all the books, and until I had an experience with some rock clacking with my son. It wasn't even a research; it was just a father-son campout, and it was at the White River Wildlife Management Area below Helena, there close to the Mississippi. And I was wondering, well, where are they getting rocks to clack together? And so I listened to that for about 45 minutes that night. And the next day we drove out, and sure enough, there was piles of rocks where they were going to fix the road on the levee there. And I said, well, there's rocks right there. And so it started getting me thinking, well, what has hands that could pick these rocks up and strike them together? So I thought there must be something out there, and it kind of intrigued me to get back in to Bigfooting. And I went to a couple of conferences, went to the Texas conference when it was held at Jefferson and all, and met some people. And uh, we organized a little group called Arkansas Primate Evidence Society. We're just big apes in the woods. And uh, we researched in the Central Arkansas area. We did go down to Falk some, but mainly in this central part of the state. And we've cast footprints, got a lot of audio, and two of my members had sightings. I had searched for this thing for 11 years before I had my first sighting, and it was in eastern Oklahoma. But I think I've been close to these things several times. The smell, the noises, something rubbing on my tent, a handprint on my hood of the car that was right next to my tent, and one time something tried to get in the car with me, and that was pretty scary when I was sleeping in the car. I did have a clear daylight sighting when something walked across the road in front of me, about 100 feet in front of my car. And so I went from a believer to a knower right then and there, because it couldn't have been anything else. It was just massive on two legs. My sighting was in 2018, and so this was about I think it was the year after I had my sighting, I believe. And I have been invited for several years to be a speaker at the Oklahoma Bigfoot Symposium in Stillwell, Oklahoma, by the MABRC. They're good guys. I'm not a member, but I consider them brothers just about. And they invited me down, and I spoke, but I had an opportunity to stay an extra 2 days after the symposium. Everybody else left, and I like the symposium a lot because most of the time uh, uh, the speakers go camping. We don't get a hotel, we go camping. And so during the day, we talk Bigfoot, and then at night, we do a little bit of squatching. And so I like that. And so everybody else had to go back to work, and because of my ability to stay, there was only one other guy that was going to stay, and we went down to the river. It was November. It was cold. It was rainy, and I hate to set up a wet tent, and so if it's raining, I'll sleep in my car, and that's what I was doing. And I was wrapped up in a gray blanket behind the wheel, and he was about 150 feet away in his pickup. Uh, and after this event, I called him on his phone and woke him up, so I knew it wasn't him. And uh, I was asleep, and something woke me up. And you know that just few seconds where you're kind of disoriented and trying to get a clear head. I was in that state right there, and noticed that my car was rocking from side to side. Not a lot, but just some. And I was saying, what's going on? And about that time, I distinctly heard the handle on the passenger door fall back into place. Something had lifted it up and let go of it, and it fell back into place. I was so glad that I had my doors locked. and it was foggy outside. It was rainy, and I didn't see anything. But that experience of the car moving, and that door handle, I knew something was trying to get in. And for a long time, I didn't have a firearm, and I finally got one a few years before this, and that was the first time I ever reached for my gun, squatching. And I had it on the dash, and when I moved inside the car and reached it, I guess it realized that I was there because I'd been wrapped up in that blanket, and I could hear it run away on 2 feet on the gravel road that we were on. And it really, really shook me up. The next day, I got up, looked for footprints, but it was gravel. I didn't see any footprints. The I looked on the passenger side, and the rear view mirror had been pushed in all of the way. So something had come up on that side of the car and tried to get in the door there. Um, Earlier that day, I had put out a couple of bananas, and there were like three bananas, and I went over there, and two of the bananas were completely gone. One banana peel was, how we just peel it back. This thing had opened it from the side, and like you would open some peas in a pod, and part of the banana was chewed up and dropped on the ground. The other part of it was gone, and so I still have in the freezer. I still have that chewed up banana. Don't know if it's evidence or not, but I got a chewed up banana and I won't let my wife throw it away. So, and so that's really what happened that time. Really, it's really unsettling to think that something could have been in the car with me, uh, or at least reaching in like that, had I not had my doors unlocked. But these things have watched us, and they know that if they maneuver that little thing there, a door opens, and inside is where the cookies are. And so I'm sure that's what he was looking for. And so that's that story. Did I say anything? No. Did I have a close encounter? I think I did.
I agree with you, man. Like, that's pretty common behavior for these things to try to do that. They get two things I know, man, is they get really curious and then they're extremely territorial. That's pretty scary to be alone at night, be woken up that way. And I think there's a sense of fear that comes along with that. Your body will wake up, when something's not right. And I think you're pretty fortunate that you had those doors locked, man, because who knows what could have happened.
The car may not have rocked if the doors were open. Just that door open, and he would have been right there. That would have been very scary. I always wanted a sighting, but I didn't want the sighting to be inside my car with me. So.
No, that's about as close as you could get with one of these creatures. There's not much room in a car. I don't blame you for that. Why don't you tell us and break down this second encounter, or your Class A encounter that you had?
Okay. Second encounter was about a half a mile from that experience. Again, it was before the symposium. People had started to gather at this camping site that we had. And when I got there, I realized, man, there's going to be way too many people at this campsite. There's, things are going to just avoid that big of group. So me and two other guys decided we were going to camp uh, a little ways away from that, so maybe something to be curious and come into a smaller group, because a big group is intimidating. And so we moved our stuff. And when I got over there to the new place, I realized that I'd forgotten my camp chair, because I had it out because were visiting for a while. And so I just hopped in my car, and it was about 5 in the afternoon. Uh, it was still daylight, but the shadows were starting to get long, if you know what I mean. And so I drove down the asphalt road and turned off onto the gravel road to where the big camp was. And I went a little ways, and then I noticed something standing on the right side of the road from me, and it was in the process of turning away from me towards the other side of the road, and it had started to take one step already. And this thing was um, uh, it was bent over, and it reminded me of like a linebacker that has a football, and how they are going to face the tackle, and so they're down and they've got their arms and the football close to their chest. This thing had its arms close to its chest, and it was bent over. I don't know uh, if it was carrying something or trying to make itself look small. Maybe it had an infant. Maybe it had its next meal in its hands. I don't know, but it was bent over, and it took one step, two step, and the third step was close to the trees, and it was gone. When I did it, it took me 8 steps to get across the road. So this thing was big, and it was about the color of a grayish, dirty brown, and it reminded me of like a pine tree bark that's not wet. That dry, that uh, grayish brown color. And I had always talked about. I'd read about how Roger Patterson had practiced reaching back to his saddlebags and grabbing the camera. He had practiced that, and so maybe that was one of the reasons we have the image of Patty that we do. But I told myself, if I ever see something in the road, I'm going to gun my car and get as close as I can to it, you know. So, but as soon as I saw it, I hit my brakes, you know, and so I watched it go across, and then I drove up to where it went across, and I could hear brush popping to the side that it went to. Now the right side that it was standing on, there was a metal uh, farm gate, and there was a pasture land. So I caught it on an exposed side. The other side, towards the river, was all trees. So it had made its way to the trees, and it was getting away that direction. And so I got back in my car, and I went down to get my chair. And when I got out of the car, I was kind of quiet, and one of the guys around the campfire said, "Man, you look like you saw a ghost." And I said, "Well, I saw something." And my mind was just racing. Was it a horse? Was it a cow? Was it a deer? Was it a bear? Was it another person? Was it? And it could be anything. And so I told one or two people about it. And the next day, a friend of mine, Big Jim Whitehead, if you haven't had him on your show, you need to have Big Jim on. He is a senior member, researcher for the MABRC. He is uh, he is an extraordinary tracker in the field. He is a Choctaw native, and his family has taught him to look for things in the woods that we would totally overlook. And he doesn't look for footprints; he looks for disturbance in the leaf clutter, he says. And so we went back the next morning, he and I, and he's called Big Jim for a reason. You know, he's about 6'3", 6'4", maybe close to 400 pounds. You know, a big guy. And I parked my car where I had stopped, and I had him down by that gate, and I had him bend over and walk across the road, and it just astounded me at the size difference between Big Jim and this thing. When it was bent over, it was still taller than he was standing straight up. It had to have been 9 inches. I mean 9 feet, 9 feet tall. And I took some photographs of him walking across. And one of the sad things, when I had my sighting, we had just really gotten there, and I had all my equipment still in the car. And on my dash, I had a GoPro camera that had not set up yet, and I could have had a great video had I had that going. It almost made me sick at my stomach thinking about that. But I took photographs of Jim going across, and then we went up there and we were talking about what happened, and he said, "Well, there's a footprint right there." And so sure enough, we were able to cast a footprint that was 18 and a half inches long, and at the toe splay, and you can see the toe splay was 11 inches wide. It was just a huge animal that I caught, just dumb luck. Out of 11 years, that's my only sighting, and it had to be in the daytime, had to be where I couldn't miss it at all. And so that was my sighting, and the saga continues because I started thinking about it. In the real world, I'm a minister of the gospel, and I preach for a living, and we've done a lot of mission work overseas and all of that, and that's really important for me. And the people in the congregation where I preached, they knew that I had an interest in this, and some of them kidded me about it, or somebody says, "Hey, I saw something on TV about Bigfoot," and so they knew that I had an interest, but having an interest and then telling people that you saw something are two different things. Now they have to make a decision, or are they going to believe me, or they're going to not believe me? And if they don't believe me, how is that going to change me being a preacher? Are they going to doubt what other things that I say? And so I thought about that all the way home. And that night I was sitting with my wife, and I said, "Mikkel, we can't tell anybody about this. It's going to hurt our family. It's going to hurt my position as a minister. And so let's just keep it quiet." Okay. And so that we decided to do that. The very next weekend was the Paracon in Little Rock at the MacArthur Park. That's always the weekend before Halloween, and for like 11 years, 12 years, I've been the Bigfoot guy. And so I go to that and talk to the UFO people and everybody else, but I'm the Bigfoot guy. And so it was my turn to speak, and I did my spiel, and I always open it up for question and answer. First arm that came up is, "Have you ever seen one of these things?" And now I'm in a dilemma in front of an audience. Do I lie to them or do I tell the truth? Of course, I told the truth, and I said yes. Second arm came up. "Would you tell us about it?" so so I went from telling my wife we can't tell anybody about this to this whole group hearing about my Bigfoot story. Little did I know that in the audience was a reporter for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette writing an article about the Paracon, and it came out Sunday morning, front page Sunday morning, and he led off with me talking about my sighting. Now you can't tell me that God doesn't have a sense of humor, because I went from don't tell anybody to the whole state knowing that I had a sighting, and I was really nervous about church, you know, and I didn't say anything about it at all. I had several people come up privately to me and say, "Did you really see something?" And I said, "Yes, I did," and that was good enough for them. All of that worry uh, about them not believing me was in vain. So I was really fortunate there that I had good brothers and sisters in Christ that believe me. So so that's my one and only sighting there.
Robert, that is really an interesting sighting, and the story behind that is really unique, especially with you being a minister. And I can understand how you would think that way. And what are you supposed to do with this stuff? How are you supposed to talk about it? Because, I've discovered, and on this channel, I don't hide my faith at all. I mean, my faith in Christ is very important to me, and I talk about it all the time on this channel. And, there's a lot of things in God's universe we don't understand, right? We can't put it in this box or don't know what to do with it.
I think it's very arrogant of us to think that we know everything too. I like that there's mysteries out there that we don't know about.
Definitely, and that's why I called the channel Mysteries Unknown, because I love mysteries, and there's a lot to unpack there with your sighting. And you're right. Most people think, well, I'm going to snap a picture, I'm going to pull out the camera, and I'm going to get a video. But I think these things are so big, and seeing something that's not supposed to be there, people really don't know how they're going to react. But what was your first initial feeling when you saw this? What's the first thing that came over you?
Well, funny. What raced through my mind at that one point was Paul Freeman in his video when he says, "There he goes." I was thinking, "There he goes," and uh, it had where the camp was next to the river. There is a grove of trees between. Probably about an acre of trees between that encampment and where I saw this thing. I think it was coming down that river and noticed that there was an encampment, and it had circled that encampment and left itself exposed at that spot. And then it got into the trees on the other side and probably went its merry way there. But could it have been? I don't. Could it have been the same one that tried to get in the car with me? I hope not. It sounds like he's got a vendetta against me or something. So there's been multiple sightings there of different ones, even a white one. And now this thing wasn't white, but in my book I find it interesting. One of the things that I did in my book is I took those 1,100 sightings and I crunched the numbers. I asked the questions: Who sees a Bigfoot? What were they doing at the time? What time of the day was it? What did they see? How big was it? What color was it? And I ask these questions, and I do percentages. In Arkansas, I think 11 or 12% of all the sightings are of white individuals. I think that's interesting. Are they seeing the one of them? Probably not, because it's spread out across the state. So I thought that was interesting too when you were talking about a white one.
That's really interesting. And for the audience who's catching up, if you've never heard my encounter, before we started to record, me and Robert were talking about my encounter that I had with my wife. We had a white, huge, massive creature on the side of the road, white, shaggy, dirty hair, jump over the hood of my car, and I was going 55 miles an hour. This thing cleared it like it was absolutely nothing. And, the cop in me kicked into that point, and I regret it now, but me and my wife, we went off through the woods looking for this thing, and I brought my wife with me, and I shouldn't have done that, but I was so, enamored by this thing. And, bringing that up makes me feel better because I don't hear too many white encounters in Arkansas. I know in different parts of the country, but that's a really unique statistic there. And speaking of your book, this is a good time to transition into that, Robert. I know that you've compiled together these stories, and it's really interesting, but before we talk about your book, would you mind maybe talking about one encounter that really leaves you puzzled, or maybe something that is just really unique? A lot of times people, when they hear Bigfoot, man, Arkansas is not the first thing come to mind. But, I mean, you said how many sightings?
Oh, in my book, over 1,100, and that's just the ones that I could find and know about. There's probably the really good ones are whispered in family groups or friends, and I've never heard of those before. I'm more than willing to put out a second volume if I get get people interested in sharing those things with me that I didn't know about in this first book. So
yeah, that's it. That's really interesting. But what encounter, what story sticks out to you? Do you have one in mind? I know I put you on the spot, man, but I know the audience would love to hear something from your book.
The sightings are in chronological order, starting in 1832, I think, 33. And I'm always intrigued about the early ones, where a guy came to visit his widowed mother, and she was in her bedroom. She had the gun beside her bed, and he said, "Well, what's that for?" He says, "Well, if that big monkey gets in my house again, I'm going to shoot it." And they there's a couple where home invasion is kind of interesting to me. Something was breaking down the front door as the family was leaving the back door to get away from it, and they built a second story onto their house with a big door, a big thick door with a lock, so they could go upstairs and be away from this thing if it ever tried to break in again. So that's just amazing to me. Uh, Back before I-40 cut across the middle of the state, the old highway, old 67, I think it was. A bus driver was uh, that had a whole bunch of passengers stopped, and he ran out into the woods to relieve himself. And he come running back saying, "There's a big monkey out there that tried to get me." And some people looked as he was trying to move the bus along. In the red rear lights, something crossed the road behind them. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting one too. So uh, there's just so many of them in here. There's one it's in a Arkansas folktale book, but uh, a farmer saw a big monkey sitting on his fence, and he thought it was a escape from the circus, and he ran home and so said to his wife, "Get my gun. The devil is sitting on our fence." And he ran out and he shot it and he killed it. And then the wife said to him, "If that was the devil, you run down and tell the parson that he doesn't have to preach so much since the devil's dead." So, I liked that. I have two from the WPA in the during the Depression. They did slave narratives, uh, old men and women that had been slaves, and they recorded their stories. And this one in southwest Arkansas, this one man that had been a slave said he was in charge of the livestock to keep the bears away, and he talked about how he saw a bear picking corn one time, and it came up to a fence, and he had all the ears of corn under its arm, and the bear tossed it over the fence, climbed over the fence, picked up the corn, put it under his arm, and went its way. Now, that's not a bear. But back then, they may have just said these are odd looking bears. So uh, so that's something that's really intriguing to me too. Things like that.
Well, that's really wild, man. It sounds like a very interesting book, and I'm just, when I saw that you wrote a book about my home state of Arkansas and Bigfoot, man, I knew I had to have you on the show. And before we get into where they could buy your book and you can talk more about it, you being, for one, a minister, I'm very excited to talk to you about this, and two, seeing this creature and being in this world, the amount of time that you have, I'm really curious on what you think these things are.
Well, I am a proponent of these being a flesh and blood animal. They are not from UFOs. They are not from other dimensions. I honestly believe that they have to fit the natural laws of this world like any other animal would. So they're flesh and blood. They live in the woods. They don't build houses that we know of. Except maybe something very crude. They eat raw meat. They don't use fire. They don't have a language that we know about, and they poop in the woods. It sounds like an animal to me, and not some higher being from another dimension. I don't think they're forest friends. They don't want to be our friend. 90% or 95% of sightings, when somebody sees it, it's trying to get away from you. And I think they're referred to as nocturnal because we're not nocturnal. We are probably its only enemy out there. It's the apex predator. Anything else in the woods, it's probably not afraid of, but because of our vehicles and our guns, they probably fear us. And they live where we don't go, and they're active at night, and we're not way out in the woods at night. And so we don't see these things until occasionally we bump into one crossing the road, or something coming close at night to get your dog food or your horse feed or something like that you have out. So I think it's a flesh and blood animal. Some people think that it is the Nephilim from the Bible in Genesis. I don't see any evidence of that. When it talks about there in Genesis that there were giants in the world then, that could have been dinosaurs. It could have been anything. You can't really just say, "Oh, they're talking about Bigfoot there." And some people even think that these things are the descendants of Esau, because in the story of Jacob and Esau in Genesis, Esau was a hairy person and had reddish hair, and so they automatically assume, oh well, then that trait has come down and they've become feral, and now they're descendants of Esau. I don't think that's the case at all either. When God made Jacob and Esau, He made humans. I don't think this is a human. I think it's an animal. There's too many biological differences. The hands are different. The feet with the mid-tarsal break, that's different. Their size is different. A sagittal crest, that's different. Hair all over its body the way it is, that's different. So there's so many other biological differences between human and man. I don't think this is a human. Is it a hominid? Well, hominid means it walks on 2 feet. So yes, it's a hominid, but that doesn't make it a human. I think it's something else, and it's really good at what it does, and we really don't know what it is. Now, if when one is found and they determine that it's something more than what I believe, well, I'll have to believe that. But until then, I think God made an interesting animal out there, and we just haven't found it yet.
I was really anxious to hear your thoughts on that because, I talked to a lot of people and there's just a wide variety of different thoughts and opinions. And, I think it's one of those things that we can have our own opinions, our own thoughts, but man, we might not ever know, what these things are, but it's interesting to talk about. And I appreciate you sharing those thoughts. And there's a lot of things in God's universe, like I said, we don't understand, but, I I love talking about this stuff, and I appreciate you sharing those thoughts. We'll get into a couple other things, but why don't you tell us where they can find your book? Tell us the title of your book and a little bit about it.
I had this database on my computer, and I thought, well, let's just see if it'll go in a book, and that's what I did. I start with the Native American tribes that were in Arkansas and what they thought about these things, and then from 1833, I think it is, to 2015, I have 1,100 sightings there. And then I crunched the numbers in the back, like I was telling you, the percentages about the witness and what was seen and the location and all of that. So you kind of get an idea as to who are seeing these things and where you could go to have the most opportunity to see one of these things. And then I have a chapter called of Bones and Bodies, talking about physical evidence, some things that have been reported in Arkansas, and so I have that. I have a chapter called Bigfoot Survival. Some people say, well, they can't be in Arkansas, but if Arkansas can have bears, Arkansas can have these things. And if they say there's not enough land, there's 19 million acres of mountain and forest and swampland in Arkansas. That's a huge habitat. And also there's a chapter in here that deals with what they can eat. Some people say, "Oh, there's not enough to sustain some of these things." Well, if you can have a bear in an area, you can have a Bigfoot. And then if you say there's not enough food in the forest, tell that to the Native Americans that lived here for centuries before that, and even tell it to our own ancestors during the Depression, where they had to feed off the land. People survived by doing that. These things can do that as well. Of course, I have to mention Boggy Creek, and I talked about the movie and things around Falk. I talk about the Monster Mart, and so there's a chapter about that, and I even have a chapter about other research groups in Arkansas or associated with Arkansas that in areas where you can get in contact with them. And so I tried to cover everything, even Arkansas in our culture here in the state. There's places where you can go to find big statues people have made of Bigfoot. The semi-pro baseball team up around the Fayetteville area, their mascot is Stryker, the Sasquatch, and so that's part of our culture as well. And so I try to just cover a lot of different things there. In the book, also, wherever there was a gap, I added some of my Sasquatch cartoons in here too, so you'll get a splattering of those as well. So that's really what the book is about, and it's called Arkansas Bigfoot: A Look at the Wild Man in the Natural State. And you can find it on Amazon. It's $20. And but if you want to order it from me and let me sign your copy, just private message me at robert@arkansasapes.com, and we can make arrangements to get that book to you, and I'll be happy to sign it for you.
Well, that's really cool, and I was very intrigued with it. Being that's my home state, and man, you're right. Arkansas's got a lot of wild areas. People don't really realize that, but it's a beautiful state and a perfect state for these things to be. There's plenty of room,
and that doesn't even include the farmland that's cultivated out there, or pasture lands that nobody lives on. Farmer may visit it once a day or so, but nobody lives out there, and so that's wild land too.
Yeah, it's crazy. I got one more question. I would really like to know your thoughts on this. And do you think these things traveling, I don't like to use family units, but that's the only word that I know that kind of makes sense. But, you know, I do know this. If you've seen one, there's generally another one really close by. Why that is, I have no idea. But do you think they travel in packs?
Well, I like that idea of family units because that's what people have seen several years ago, close to the Little Rock Air Force Base. Early morning, pre-dawn morning, a woman saw two adults and a juvenile cross the road in front of her. Here's an intriguing thing that happened. It was kind of around, I think, in the Ozark area. A guy had a farm up on the hill, and he was driving, and he sees this small thing in the road, and and all of a sudden here comes a big female out of the woods, and it grabs up that young one, and turns around and runs back to where it was. And he stops his car and he gets out of it, and he's looking, trying to see if he can see it again. And a rock hits his car in the back, and he turns around, and about 10 foot behind him was a huge male Bigfoot. And he jumped back in his car, and he raced up about, he said, about 100 yards or so, and he stopped, and he got out of the car again to look back to see if he could see something, and rocks started hitting his car again. So there was a family group, a mother protecting the young, and then the male protecting both of them. And so, yeah, there are family groups out there, and I and I don't think they migrate to, the ones that are seen out west are not the same ones that are seen here in the south. But I think they move through regionally. Where I live in Valonia, Arkansas, there's several sightings in this area, but I don't think they live here. To the south of us is Lake Conway with a lot of forest around it, plus Camp Robinson, which is a military base that has thousands of acres of untouched land. And so I think they are there. And to the north of us in our county, there's a Cadron Creek that has a lot of forest around. It's a small river, but it has a lot of forest around it too. And so I think they cross through here at Valonia, and people see them. Now, I think these things are a primate, and like other big primates, there's usually an alpha male, and when other males get sexually mature, sometimes they're driven out of the group. Uh, and so some of these things, by far the majority of the sightings are of male animals. I think if they were female, somebody would mention the breasts. If it was young, that's mentioned. But these are males about 7 foot tall, and I think maybe they've been driven out and they're looking for a territory of their own or a girlfriend of their own, and they're out of place, and that's why we see them so much. So I do think you're right, though, that if you see one, there could possibly be others, and that one that you see is mainly a male, and so he's probably protecting the other group. Yeah, I would be very fearful about trying to shoot one of these things because there's probably others in the wings.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed those encounters. Such a strange world. There's a lot that goes on in God's universe that I simply do not understand. And every time I hear these encounters and I listen to them, I learn something. And a lot of times I'm hearing these stories for the first time with you guys when I interview people. But, I appreciate all the support and everybody just being here and supporting this channel. And if you're sitting on an encounter that you wanted to share for a long time, I would love to hear about it and just give you a place, a safe place for you to share your encounters. So I appreciate everybody. I appreciate all the support. Be careful when you're out in the woods camping or just around your house because you never know what's lurking around the corner. But I'm going to say it, guys. Stay prayed up. We'll see you in the next episode.